Previously on our Satisfactory 1.0 series, we have begun laying out the foundations to our aluminium factory whilst connecting our small petroleum coke setup via train. We also finished our main train station, bringing in all the bauxite from across the world. Not to mention, we also built our space elevator hub. Coming up on today's episode, we'll be expanding our aluminium setup whilst fixing a logistical problem that is vital for maximum productivity, and also bringing in the remainder of resources that we need for this project. If that sounds exciting, then don't forget to leave a like for the sake of the YouTube algorithm. Currently seeing is essentially every single recipe in Satisfactory 1.0 that I am going to be making in my series. Essentially, all of this will be making our 3 main space elevator parts in phase 5, and also a bunch of Fixonium fuel rods for power. From these recipes, I have taken everything that involves aluminium and laid it all out over here. So we have our heat sinks at the very top, we then have our aluminium casings, our packaged nitrogen gas, which is essentially just empty fluid tanks plus nitrogen gas, and lastly we have our alclad aluminium sheets. Here's all the basic resources that I need. Firstly, we need 1,335 petroleum coke, and instantly we've got ourselves a problem. To understand why that is, we have to come back to our definitely unfinished petroleum coke factory. This is where we are exporting 1,200 petroleum coke, but that's less than 1,335. So, even though this is a great way of not wasting my petroleum coke, it's also not enough. If only there was a cluster of crude oil right next to where our aluminium factory is. Oh wait, there is. Our aluminium factory is roughly right here, and next to us we've got all of this crude oil over here, which in total is 1,200 crude oil per minute. Because here we've got 30 crude oil that gives us 40 heavy oil residue. Then the 40 heavy oil residue goes straight to make our 120 petroleum coke. So the ratios here actually work out tremendously. So that will give us 1,600 heavy oil residue. Then take that 1,600, then times it by 3, because 120 is 3 times 40. And that gives us 4,800 petroleum coke, which is obviously way more than what we're making here, and way more than what we actually need. We can actually burn it in our coal generator to give us a bunch of power, but I don't know, we'll see about that. We're also going to need 708 copper ore. There's not really any copper that close towards us, but what I can do is grab this normal node and this impure node, combine them together, and that will give us 900 per minute. That won't take too long to do, so copper is not a problem. However, another problem is water. 4,200 per minute is quite a bit. 4,200 water divided by 120, since one water extractor can produce 120 water per minute, means that we need 35 water extractors just for this tiny project. Well, I say tiny project, it's literally making everything to do with aluminium in our world, so it's not really that tiny. Originally, my plan was to place down all of our water extractors in this little pond area over here and up here as well, but I don't think there'll be enough room. If there's not enough room, that's fine, because what I can also do instead is just come up here and get a bunch of water, especially considering all of this water is right next to our plastic, rubber and petroleum coke setup, so all of my rail infrastructure is already built. Lastly, we have our bauxite, and I've already got plenty of bauxite coming in, so this has already been completed. So where the bloody hell do we begin? Well, let's start with our water. The worst thing about when your game lags is that you have no control where your character's going. I am desperately trying to go in the other direction, but the game's like, no, not today. So there's the bare bones of our aluminium factory, and this was the lake I was showing you a bit earlier on. Apologies there for the lag as well. Unfortunately, we have got those very, very annoying spiky things sort of just sticking out that lake, so that is going to disrupt our plans a little bit, but let's see if we can place down 35 of these water extractors in this lake, or even if we can place down one. I don't know if it's deep enough. Oh dear. Okay, so the good news is, yes, it is deep enough. Now, essentially, I want to try and place down a minimum of 35, because preferably I actually want to try and have a lot more in here than just 35, because as you may remember for our petroleum coke recipe, we are using something called the heavy oil residue alternate recipe, which also gives us polymer resin. Now, if I was to combine this polymer resin with, I don't know, water, let's say, it means that we can essentially make ourselves a bunch of plastic. In fact, here's a pretty fun fact. in my entire factory, including all the Phase 5 or Tier 12, whatever it is, space elevator parts, guess how much plastic and rubber I'm using? I'll give you a couple seconds to guess. It's 250. In every single recipe combined, it's 200 plastic, I believe it is, and 50 rubber. And judging by the way things look over here, yes, we can definitely fit 35 of these water extractors into here, which is so freaking awesome. And it looks like we've got a bunch of room to try and beautify this area here as well, which again is great. And there you go, this is literally 39 water extractors, so yeah, this is tons of room. We can probably try and make this look quite nice and neat, but I'm not going to decorate this on today's video. Instead, I'm going to be streaming this over on Twitch. So if you'd like to see more of my content, the behind the scenes and also my streams, then feel free to follow me over on Twitch. Just a few hours later, and this is the essential foundations of what we need. Of course, eventually I do want to end up building some sort of like glass wall around this thing. However, the main thing I wanted to get done in this little session here is essentially the pipe logistics, which should all be running at full efficiency, which is fantastic. And I do realize that you can have 5 water extractors producing 120 water per minute, going into one Mark II pipeline, since this can hold up to 600 water per minute. But the reason why I've only done 4 water extractors rather than 5 is because I just don't trust the liquid logistics in this game at all. So we've got 480 water per minute in all of these pipes right here, which will give us plenty of water for our expansion. The next step now is to try and build something that just goes up here. Oh, nice. That just goes up here, carrying all the pipes, and then straight to our aluminium factory. I've just realized it kind of lines up with this, which I don't necessarily know if that's a good thing or not. I suppose I could try and put the pipes underneath. Would there be enough room? I think, well, no, there wouldn't be. Okay, that's a bit of a problem then. So the pipes might have to go above the train? How would that look though? I can't imagine that would look very good. Maybe what I'll do is I'll build some sort of like glass wall that mimics the shape of our underground system. We then bring it out all the way down to the end of this thing. And then either on top or below of the glass we can then have our pipes, which could look rather immersive. And of course our water can just go over here to the right or the left, but preferably the right, and just do its thing essentially. So that could be a part of the plan, and at least then it might look a bit symmetrical as well, but I do want to double check just to make sure it definitely does line up, because again, I wasn't really planning this, but it kind of looks like it does, right? Also again, apologies for the lag. I know it's probably a bit frustrating to see. I am cutting out most of the parts where my game does lag rather badly, but I do apologize if you do see it here or there, because there's nothing really I can do about it other than upgrading my PC. But as of right now, I'm trying to save up for something else, which I'll probably make a video about, because it's more like an in real life sort of stuff rather than Satisfactory related. But yeah, again, apologies for the lag. Now let's connect the pipes. That's all sorted, so now let's add in our pipeline pumps. Sorted, now let's go up. And as I do that, I'll also think of a design for up here as well. As you can probably imagine, I've overdone things again. There's quite a lot to go through, so let's begin. I suppose you might as well talk about this area first, which again is where our petroleum coke comes in and out. Roof design is nice and simple, and as you can see, yes, we have got those pipes above us. We also have this rather interesting shape here with the roof, where it doesn't actually join equally, so like there's like a bit of a weird pattern. But honestly, I actually ended up quite liking this, so I kept it as just a random feature. Additionally, I've also added this concrete area over here on the left and this area here on the right. These are going to be 2 separate factories, and I've actually got a plan for this one. So remember how I was talking about all that petroleum coke, where we're literally grabbing our crude oil right down. I've run out of range, cool. We're grabbing our crude oil from right down there. So what better place to turn our crude oil into petroleum coke than this spot? I don't see a reason not to. Of course, I've still got to work on the roof. It looks a bit shite, and that's completely fine. This is just a work in progress, and I wanted to get the bare bones in just so I can try and complete what I was trying to do, which was really these pipes up here. And again, ignore the roof. This will most likely change in time to come. But all of our water, which comes from down there, goes straight along here and into this area, which looks a little bit like half an X, but there we go. So all of these pumps, or pipes should I say, go straight into this wall over here, which you can't actually see over here because it just goes straight into there, which I think looks quite nice. And then it goes into this room right here, which I will be extending in the future. This will be one of our logistic floors in the factory. So if I need some water over here, let's say to make our plastic from the polymer resin that we get as a byproduct from making a heavy oil residue whilst we make our petroleum coke. Bloody hell, that was a big mouthful. We can then bring some water over there. I'll have to take a breather after that one. But yeah, we can bring some water around over there. That'll be completely fine. But then let's say for this part of the factory, where we're working with all our alumina solution, or aluminium solution, whatever I like to call it, we then bring our water from here and then bring it straight round to this side, just like that, into another wall hole, and then it just goes wherever it has to, and it can also travel along the ceiling as well if needs be. So our water logistics, which again was the whole point of doing all of this, is completely fine, and I'm very happy with it. And you might also be able to notice it is exactly central, which means that this must have lined up with what I was doing previously, right? About that. Unfortunately, it didn't. For whatever reason, it was like 1/6 of a foundation out of place. I don't know why. It may be something that I did down there, which actually is starting to look really cool. I'm loving the shape of this thing. But yeah, it doesn't exactly line up, but you know what? It was so close, I had to add it as part of the feature. Also, I don't think I've actually shown you the exterior, and this is the main reason as to why this project took around 4.5 hours. Rather than the half an hour or hour I was actually expecting it to take. I had to redesign this thing maybe 3 or 4 different times, purely because I wasn't very happy with the way it looked. I had to add in these lights, which of course I've added lights all throughout the place. And I've also redesigned this area here as well, because again, I just wasn't very happy with the way it looked. Because even though I'm really happy with how this turned out, we've barely even touched the surface of what I actually want to try and accomplish today. So let's fly down there. Because for this next project, we're going to need you, and that little black dot over there as well. That is right, it's time to make our petroleum coke, and that little factory area I just showed you prior. Just like that, it is done. But let me show you what I've done anyway. So when it comes to this part over here, you might recognize this blueprint right here. This is my crosswalk that I used over in my space elevator blueprint design. But now I've actually used it for pipes, and of course I'm also going to use it for my conveyor belts there as well. So I'm quite happy with the way that looks. Holy lag, I do apologize for that. When it comes to all of our crude oil, this is giving us 600 per minute, whereas the other 2 nodes are giving us 300. So when I split this one like so, it means that all 4 of these pipes are giving us 300 crude oil per minute. 4 pipes then continue straight into this part of the factory, where I've already laid some things out, but before I show you what I've done up there, this is where things can get a little bit tricky. So these 4 pipes are going to try and squeeze their way into here, which they should be able to do. Bit of lag there, whoops. But after this tight little area down there, they then have all this open area over here. So logistic work will be so much easier to do past this area over here. So that's not a problem at all. Of course, when update 1.1 comes out, we can manually remove the crash sites. So that won't be a problem. But what will be a problem though is the uranium. I've still got to try and find a way to remove all of it, because when I was building the outside of this project here, as you can see, the uranium does damage me, which kind of got very annoying very quickly. Regardless, let's talk a bit more about what I've done up here. So essentially what I've done here is I've connected the refineries where their inputs, essentially the crude oil, is traveling along this small corridor along there. And then the outputs, which should be the polymer resin and the heavy oil residue, comes out on either side. The best part about this, and this actually worked out amazingly, is that as you can see, one refinery takes 30 crude oil per minute, and we've got 300 per minute per pipe. So one pipe goes into 10 of these refineries. So 400 heavy oil residue comes out, and 200 polymer resin also comes out there as well. The maths is absolutely perfect. What I've got to try and do now is add 3 more of these things along this line here, which will be very easy to do, except for the radiation, which I might have to tackle beforehand, but regardless, this will not be a problem. After that, I then have to connect some of our water, which is up there obviously, with our polymer resin, and then what I'm actually thinking of doing is then turning all of that into plastic, like what I was mentioning earlier, and turn all the plastic into canisters. Because as you can see, yes, we're consuming a lot of water, but we're also getting loads of water back in return. So all of this excess water that we essentially get for every single recipe, all of that will be packaged, and then that will then be used in other projects around my world. I could re-add it back into the cycle here, but it's a little bit easier said than done. And of course, all the heavy oil residue then gets turned into petroleum coke. So this entire area over here is going to be actually a rather big expansion, one of which that I'm definitely looking forward to. So now I'm going to work on getting all this area over here sorted with all the logistics. So I got a little bit carried away, but luckily I have finished converting all of our crude oil into polymer resin and heavy oil residue. We have obviously done a little bit of logistic work underneath here as well, but there is really nothing too complicated. This project has taken a little bit longer than I expected because I'm not using any blueprints. This is all being built by hand. So the crude oil goes in there in the middle, then the heavy oil residue and the polymer resin comes out along the sides. And I think this will actually end up looking quite nice here. When you are in the train just driving past, there's a bit of action, a bit of movement. So now I want to try and turn all of that heavy oil residue into petroleum coke. And this is the area that I'm going to do it in. And luckily it is so easy to convert, because each one of these pumps, or pipes should I say, has got 400 heavy oil residue. 400 goes into there, then of course you then have 1200 petroleum coke coming out. I haven't got a Mark 6 conveyor belt, so I've got to split this into a couple of Mark 5 belts instead, but that's not a problem. After that, we then get our polymer resin and our water, then turn it into plastic. I've done all the measurements, and this next project should be able to fit right into here. Hopefully. So let's expand this project even further. That right there is a pretty good amount of refineries, so let me show you what I've been working on. Firstly, we have added this crossway right here, which connects us from our petroleum coke stuff on the side, which I've just done now, with our heavy oil residue and polymer resin stuff, which I showed you in the previous cutscene. We then have this area over here as well, which I might add something in here in the future. And then this, which is where our plastic part of the factory is going to end up going. I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a moment. But the main reason as to why I added this crosswalk here is for two main reasons. One, for walkability. I think it looks quite nice. And secondly, it transitions from this layer, this floor level, all the way up to this floor level. It's not actually the same height, but now that I've added this crosswalk, it looks a bit similar. Crosswalk, I don't know what that word was supposed to be. Crosswalk. Then it adds a bit more of a vertical element to the factory, which I do quite like. This is now going to go to the plastic part of the factory I was showing you just a second ago. And that will be right here. I think we're going to have about 13 refineries. So yeah, that should all be able to fit into here, no problem. Additionally, all of the petroleum coke that we're making, which hopefully should be around about 500 or 600 petroleum coke per belt, goes all the way up over there, then over there, which is fantastic. Another exterior change that I've made is I've added this walkway that goes around and this glass roof here as well. So let's build our plastic facility, let's get some water in, let's get some polymer resin, and let's get some bloody plastic going. I don't know what accent that was supposed to be. And essentially, this is the design that we're going to be going with. Water and the polymer resin then forms the plastic. And essentially, everything I've done here, I'm then going to replicate 7 more times. And that will be it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if we were to end that there, this building might even extend around a little bit. I might add some sort of like circular pattern, because if I was to do that, I can then add in all of my constructors, turning our plastic, which is literally being produced right here, straight into our canisters, which I feel like would be a pretty good thing to do. So hopefully I can try and squeeze that in. Yeah, so far progress has been made, but let's continue. And just like that, everything is now being connected, and it's all running completely fine, which of course is beautiful. So the exterior part of this project is now complete. And yes, I ended up committing and building the semicircle. It juts both inwards and outwards of this building here as well, which gives it a slightly unique shape, because as of right now, it was just a bit rectangular, so this has managed to break things up here a little bit. Something else that I'm also going to try and build along here is some wall that looks a little bit similar to that, but of course on this side, because this right here is our underground. And I don't particularly want this to be too visible from the outside, but I don't want to get rid of this, because I really like it, and that's definitely not going to happen in today's episode. So let me give you a quick tour of what I've done in the inside here, because it really isn't that complicated, and pretty much is exactly what I said I was going to do. So I built all of these refineries, which I think I might have already shown. Again, it's the next day, so I actually forgot what I recorded last night. But regardless, yet all of our refineries producing all of our plastic. This conveyor belt then combines with this conveyor belt over here. then both come round over here to then produce all of our canisters. Our canisters then end up going somewhere in here where I don't know where they're going to end up going. Obviously, the interior here is not yet complete. I do want to add some sort of wall in here that could look quite nice, but the main logistics part is now done. I'm currently in the process of trying to experiment with new shapes and new patterns, and as of right now, I'm happy with how it's coming along. However, we are missing something that is very crucial to this project, and that is copper. Oh, if only there was a way I was able to place down a bunch of radio towers so I knew exactly where these copper nodes were. Oh, wait a minute. I have. So all I've got to do, I believe, is press this button here, and then, wow, okay, that's fantastic. So there's one copper node right there, and there's another copper node right there. As long as I built both of these together, this should provide me with more than enough copper for this entire project. So let's go do that right now. So now our copper ore is coming into our factory, where I've decided to add something a little bit interesting, and this was always part of the main idea. So our water, which is coming in from literally right below here, which, as we'll be able to see now, is, again, like right there, which is fantastic. And our copper, which is coming in from down that side, can now come up here to form all of our copper ingots. But what exactly will that be making? Well, firstly, we need copper ingots to make our aluminium sheets, and we also need copper ingots to make our copper sheets. But what I want to focus on as of right now is this recipe, not our copper sheet recipe. So now let's make all of our copper ingots for our aluminium sheets to make our heat sinks, as well as the copper ingots to make our aluminium casing, and of course, again, to make our alkali aluminium sheets. We also have got a bunch more copper ingots to make down here. Rather than just combining a bunch of copper ingots together, then splitting them later down the line, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set one of my refineries, let's use this as the example here, to make our 30 copper ingots. This will not be connecting with any other conveyor belt. We've got a lot of work to do, both logistically and of course practically, because I've got to try and fit in every single refinery here. And although it doesn't look like I've made tons of progress up here, down below I've got everything sorted, well, for these first two refineries that I'll then be repeating throughout the entire process. But what exactly am I going to do over here? Because again, despite all of our petroleum coke that's going into here being 600 each, they all have the exact same value, our copper sheets and our copper ingots are completely different to one another. So what on earth am I going to do? Well, I have added all these signs here, which essentially replicate each one of these conveyor belt holes that we saw just a little bit earlier on down here. It goes 5 along there, then 4 up. We then have an additional 6 conveyor belts leaving the area through that direction over there. And again, I've replicated that up here. So let's say one of our conveyor belts, we'll use this as an example, has got 300 petroleum coke going in. If I can type 300, that would be amazing. That would be 300 PC, which just stands for petroleum coke. And then there you go. Now when I do all of my maths, and let's say I'm a bit confused down there as to what's going where, I can just come back over here to this miniature map, which will most certainly be removed after a while, and I can see, okay, fantastic, that's 300 petroleum coke, I know exactly where that's going, and of course I'll then know where it's gonna end up, which is fantastic. Now using that board and our logistics floor below, and of course our usual refinery techniques, I now want to try and get all of my copper ingots done, which I'm hoping won't take too long. That took longer than I thought it would. This part wasn't too bad, it was just getting some water in, getting some copper in, and that's about it. But this part in here, oh boy. Conveyor belt work like this is essentially a puzzle, and every single conveyor belt is essentially a piece of that puzzle, and it's just trying to get it to fit where it should. But unfortunately, when you're dealing with multiple different levels of conveyor belts and pipes and all sorts, then as you can see, things start to get a little bit more complicated. Alas, it's done. But essentially, this is all just for the copper ingots. Now what I'm going to make most likely over here is all of our refineries to make our copper ingots going into our copper sheets. And oh yeah, I probably should have said I had to get rid of where the copper ore was coming in because, again, this project required a lot more refineries than it was originally intended. I believe it was originally coming up from there. Yeah, there you go, it was. But I'm going to have to move it back a few foundations, but that is not a problem at all. I'm rather concerned by how long this is taking so far, but I definitely want to try and get the copper sheets done in today's episode. The problem is, today's video that you're currently watching, despite probably being quite a short upload, has taken about 6 days to do. And that's just purely because in real life, I've been really busy recently with some things I can't really talk too much about, so I do apologize for that. So we placed down one of our refineries there, which will be making all of our copper ingots, and then another refinery right about there, which will then be making our copper sheets. Of course, our ingots just goes straight into there, and our water connects from either underneath or just along here. So it might even be better to actually build this up here than have this area down here as our logistics floor. That way it will make things a bit easier for us. So yeah, we'll probably commit with this. And there we have it. All of our copper sheets are being made. Let me give you a very quick tour of what I've done. I did actually save a clip where I showed like these original 4, I think it was, refineries, but I deleted the clip. I'm an absolute idiot sandwich. So let me give you a quick tour of what I've done here anyway. So our water comes up here and our remaining copper. Our water and our copper then comes into these very first row of refineries, which goes all the way down over there, which then makes all of our copper ingots. And luckily, our copper ingots have a 1-to-1 ratio going into our copper sheets, so a very, very simple connection right there, nothing too complicated, nothing too difficult. All we have to do is just add in a little bit more water, and before you know it, we can make a bunch of steamed copper sheets. And the reason why I'm doing this, by the way, is because I end up saving a ton of copper, which is great. Also, it's not really that difficult to make. You just gotta put a little bit of man hours into it, and you can do it pretty easily. Over here on the, well, technically the front side of the factory, all of our copper sheets then get collected. Then, by the powers that may be, aka conveyor belts, I then gather all the copper sheets and bring them around over here. And our copper sheet and water logistics do kind of get in the way of each other, and they do overlap here in some places. But you have to remember that eventually this foundation is going to completely cover all of this. The reason as to why I haven't done it now is just so I can show... That isn't straight. Bear with. I do beg for your eternal forgiveness. I didn't mean to do that, but there you go. It does get in the way, but you know what, it is what it is. It's all going to be covered eventually. I just wanted to show you what I've been working on. And of course, eventually, I've also took notes of where all of our copper sheets, copper ingots, and petroleum coke is going in regards of our main logistic nightmare, I suppose you can call it now. But yeah, so that's all being documented up there. We've actually got 2 gaps up there as well, which is brilliant, and that's not a problem whatsoever. Now, you may notice there is a massive gap here in the middle. I don't know what to add here. I might continue this going back a little bit, I don't know. Of course, as well, I do want to have some sort of roof and overall structure going around this thing, but that will be worked on off camera again, probably on a Twitch stream, because that's not really a major part of the project. I'm honestly just happy that we managed to get all of this done today. I think it's time for a quick recap. Towards the start of today's video, we built this, where we can get all of our water being pumped straight up here, going towards our factory. We then built the interior of our little train entrance, which I'm still very, very happy with. I think it looks absolutely gorgeous. We then gathered a bunch of crude oil and pumped it straight into our factory. We then turned all of that crude oil into heavy oil residue and polymer resin. And there was a lot of refineries here. Heavy oil residue then went over here to make our petroleum coke. Ended up being a lot more refineries again than what I originally thought I was going to need. What about all of that polymer resin? Well, in this clearly unfinished room, which I'll work on off camera, we then combined all of our polymer resin with some water to get ourselves some plastic. And despite not being a lot of plastic, it's still a decent amount, and it's still a lot better than nothing, of course. And we then eventually turned that plastic into canisters. We then ended up doing some exterior work, which I'm still very, very happy with. Especially this balcony over here. There's just something about walking out there. You've got the little semicircle, which serves nothing. Like, this is useless. I'll definitely put something in there eventually, of course. But you just walk out there, you see the train coming up. You see the actual factory itself, and of course you got this beautiful view of the Titan Forest. We also got some copper ore in, but despite all of this logistic chaos, we managed to produce all of our copper ingots that we are going to need throughout this aluminium factory. And of course, after a little bit more logistic chaos, as you've just seen in our last cutscene, we then managed to make all of our copper sheets over here as well. So despite us actually accomplishing a lot today, we actually didn't really do much at all. I mean, we haven't even started our aluminium stuff just yet, which I'm still planning to put over there, although I might even build something here to do with aluminium as well, since, I mean, there's a lot of room here that we're just not fully utilizing just yet. Having said that, I've actually run into a very big problem. A problem which I haven't mentioned in today's video, and I'm actually not going to mention. You're going to have to tune into our next part of the series to find out what that problem is. Because as of right now, I can no longer progress in the game until I do it. Comment down below what you think it is, because I'm sure one of you is actually going to be correct. But it's such a stupid mistake, it's actually embarrassing. But leave your comments down below as to what you may think that is. But as of right now, I'm going to love you and leave you, so thank you very much for tuning into today's Satisfactory video. I really hope that you guys did enjoy it. Feel free to drop a like if you did, and thank you for watching. Before we go, a massive thank you to our channel members: The Bearded Cobra, Jao, Variants, Nicole Still Plays, Asuna, Natormal, Yummy Kill Burns, Chaos Rising, Scott and Hattie, and Mau Mau. If you decide to become a Knight of the Realm for just £2.99 a month, you get access to channel-only emotes, unique badges, and also shoutouts in videos. Memberships are the best way to support my channel, but you don't have to become a member. Even just by watching today's video, you are supporting the channel massively. Here's a couple more videos I've made that you might be interested in. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Have an amazing rest of your day, and remember, Godspeed.